Apologize to my daughter or this marriage is over. That was the moment my life split cleanly in two before those words and after them. My name is Evelyn. I am 58 years old, a black woman, a retired nurse, and until that night, a wife who believed endurance was the same thing as love. I'm telling you this plainly because I want you to understand the problem immediately. My husband chose his grown daughter over my dignity, and he did it publicly, violently, and without hesitation. The daughter he demanded I apologize to was Amanda, his daughter from his first marriage, 32 years old, divorced, unemployed, and newly moved into the house I helped pay for, the house I cleaned every morning, the house I cooked in every night like it still meant something. That evening started like so many others with me trying too hard. I cooked Amanda's favorite meal because Richard had mentioned it twice that week. Smothered chicken, macaroni and cheese, buttered green beans, cornbread baked fresh. I set the table carefully, like my mother taught me, because food was never just food in our family. It was respect. It was peace. It was love, served warm. Amanda sat down already irritated. She took one bite of the mac and cheese, made a face, and without saying a word, leaned over and spit it straight into the trash can beside the counter. Not discreetly, not quietly. She made sure I saw it. "Jesus," she said, wiping her mouth. "This is disgusting." Richard froze. I froze too, but not in shock. In that familiar way you freeze when you know exactly what's coming and still hope it won't. I said nothing. I told myself, she's hurting. She's going through a lot. Don't escalate. Keep the family together. Amanda wasn't finished. "This is what happens when someone who's not really family tries to play house," she muttered, loud enough to hear. "My mom never cooked like this. It's bracted." I felt the words scrape something raw inside me, but I stayed quiet. I had swallowed worse over the years. I began collecting plates, hoping movement would keep my voice steady. Then she stood up, lifted her bowl of noodles, and in one sharp, deliberate motion dumped it down the front of my blouse. Hot sauce soaked into the fabric, pasta slid to the floor. The room went dead silent. "I told you it was trash," Amanda said, "so I figured it belonged on you." Understands. I stood there, noodles clinging to my clothes, the smell of garlic and shame rising together. My hands shook, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I looked at Richard, waiting, begging without words for him to step in. He didn't. Something inside me hardened. "Enough," I said, my voice low, tight. "You do not speak to me that way. You do not touch me, and you do not disrespect my parents by acting like the values they raised me with are beneath you." Her eyes narrowed. "Your parents?" she laughed. "Please, I've seen the kind of people you come from." That was when I raised my voice, not loud, but sharp. A warning. "You don't get to bring my mother and father into this," I said. "They raised me to have dignity, something you clearly lack." Richard slammed his hand on the counter. "Apologize to my daughter or this marriage is over." The words echoed against the cabinets, against my chest. Amanda looked pleased, victorious. She crossed her arms and waited. I looked at my husband, the man who once promised I would never be disrespected in his home. I searched his face for doubt, for regret, for anything that told me he hadn't meant it. There was nothing. I took off my gloves slowly, carefully, and set them beside the sink. My voice surprised even me with how steady it sounded. "I'm leaving now," Amanda scoffed. "You're being dramatic." Richard blinked. "What?" "I'm leaving now," I repeated. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I walked down the hallway and packed a small bag clothes, my journal, my medication, and the envelope I had kept tucked away for years, the one with my name on the deed. The one Richard never bothered to read because he trusted me to handle the boring stuff. He followed me to the door. "Evie, don't do this. Just say you're sorry." I looked at him and answered honestly. "You didn't ask for an apology. You asked for my silence." Outside, the night air wrapped around me like relief. I slid into my old Buick and drove away without looking back. I went to my sister Della's house. She opened the door in her robe and slippers, took one look at my stained blouse, and stepped aside without asking a single question. That's what love looks like when it's real. Later, sitting on her couch with a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands, she finally asked, "What did he say to you?" I told her everything. She shook her head slowly. Any man who lets his daughter humiliate his wife already chose his side. That night, sleep came in pieces. But something else came too, relief. I didn't know yet about the bank calls, the frozen accounts, the courtroom, or the way the truth would eventually surface in front of everyone who thought my silence meant weakness. All I knew was this: I had spent years shrinking myself to keep a family together that only existed as long as I accepted abuse. And that night, covered in spilled noodles and dignity finally intact, I chose myself. That was the night everything truly began. Della didn't ask many questions that night. She didn't have to. She's my older sister by 5 years, sharp as broken glass when she needs to be, and soft as cornbread when she chooses. We've lived through too many of the same storms for me to have to spell things out. All she needed to see was the mess on my blouse and the look in my eyes. That was enough. She pulled out the old floral sheets from the hall closet and made up the pull-out couch without a word. Her living room smelled like lemon floor polish and eucalyptus oil, Della's signature scent. She put a bottle of water on the nightstand, turned the lamp low, and sat on the edge of the mattress. "You ain't gotta tell me everything," she said, "but I want you to promise me one thing." I looked at her, eyes heavy. "No more going back to where you ain't welcome," she said. "That's not a marriage, Evie. That's a trap with curtains." I nodded. "I'm tired, Dell." She leaned forward and kissed my forehead. "Then rest. You're safe now." That night, sleep came in waves. I'd drift off for a few minutes, then wake up remembering the sound of the plate hitting my chest, the slow drip of sauce down my blouse, the way Richard looked at me like I was the problem. The room would go quiet again, and I'd listen to the hum of the old refrigerator in Della's kitchen. That sound, steady, unchanging, was strangely comforting. Unlike Richard, the fridge knew its job and did it without complaint. By morning, the light through the blinds was sharp and unforgiving. I sat up slowly, joints stiff, shoulders sore like I'd been carrying something heavy in my sleep. In a way, I had. Years' worth of swallowed words and buried disappointments had settled into my bones. Della was already up, wearing her housecoat and humming to herself in the kitchen. She handed me a mug of coffee, strong, no sugar, the way I liked it. On the table sat a plate of hot biscuits and scrambled eggs. "I didn't know if you were ready to talk," she said, sitting across from me. "But I figured food wouldn't hurt." I nodded, managing a small smile. "You always know." I watched Mama do it. She didn't always have the right words, but she knew a hot biscuit fixed a lot of hurt. Anna bowed. "It was Maravent." I buttered mine slowly, watching the way the heat melted the spread into soft yellow pools. "Richard let her dump food on me, Dell, right on my chest, and then he asked me to apologize." Della's eyes darkened. She didn't speak for a moment. When she finally did, her voice was low and firm. "You better not even be thinking of calling him." "I'm not," I said quickly, "but my name's still on everything. The house, the car, the accounts." Della looked at me over her coffee mug. "You kept the papers, didn't you? The ones you had drawn up after y'all married?" I nodded. "They're in my bag. You always were the smart one." That made me laugh, soft and bitter. "Didn't feel smart last night. You were just loyal." That's not the same thing as being wrong. Later that morning, I took a long shower, one of those that feels like washing off more than just dirt. I changed into clean clothes and sat on the edge of the guest bed with my bag open beside me. The envelope was still there, thick and worn, labeled in my own handwriting. Property and financial agreements, 2014. Back then, when Richard and I married, I had been cautious, not suspicious, just prepared. My first husband, Thomas, God rest his soul, taught me the value of keeping things clear. He was a man who never wanted me to be dependent. He left me with more than memories, he left me with wisdom. I opened the envelope slowly, laying the documents out across the bed. Deed copies, the prenuptial agreement, joint account authorizations with my name listed as primary, my retirement savings, the title to the Buick. It was all there. I felt my chest ease, just slightly. I wasn't starting from nothing. I had ground beneath me, even if it wasn't the one I thought I'd be standing on. Around noon, my phone buzzed. "Richard." I didn't answer. Then a second message, "Amanda." Blocked. Then Richard again. I turned the phone face down on the bed and walked into the kitchen. "I think I need to see a lawyer," I said. Della nodded, already pulling out the yellow pages. "I know someone. Offices above that hardware store off Main. He's old school, talks slow, doesn't use too many big words. Perfect. I'll drive." The ride into town was quiet, except for the country station humming through the speakers. Savannah spread out around us, oak trees with moss like lace, storefronts with hand-painted signs. It was the kind of town where people remember what kind of pie you like and who your mama used to be. The law office was small and smelled faintly of old books and coffee. The receptionist, a polite woman named Martha, offered sweet tea and told me Mr. Carter would be out shortly. He emerged a few minutes later, a white man in his 60s, with a paunch under his vest and a calm, measured way of moving. He shook my hand gently, then waved me into a chair. I told him everything, not in a flood, but slowly, piece by piece, like laying out tools on a table before fixing something broken. When I finished, he didn't look shocked, just thoughtful. "You were smart to get those documents signed," he said, flipping through the copies. "Too many women don't think they'll ever need them, until they do. Will they hold?" He nodded. "They'll hold." I felt something shift in me, something like steadiness. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I just want my life back." "Mr. Carter leaned back and folded his hands. "Then you've come to the right place." That night, back at Della's, we sat on the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade and no mosquitoes, some kind of small miracle in Georgia. The air was heavy, but not oppressive, just settled. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted. Della leaned back in her chair. "You don't have to. Just don't go back to yesterday." I nodded, staring out at the streetlight casting its glow over the sidewalk. Tomorrow, I'd begin calling the credit union, sorting through accounts, making things legal. But tonight, I was here, alive, standing, and, for the first time in a long while, not apologizing for either. I didn't expect peace to feel so quiet. That next morning, I woke up before the sun body still trained by years of early nursing shifts and late-night worry. Della was still asleep down the hall, the old fan humming steadily in her bedroom. I wrapped myself in her quilted robe and tiptoed to the kitchen, where I brewed the strongest coffee I could manage and sat down at the small dinette beneath the window. Savannah mornings are a strange kind of soft. The light doesn't just rise, it unfolds. The trees swayed in the breeze outside, moss dripping from their limbs like silk scarves. And for the first time in years, I didn't have a house to clean, or a man to feed, or a fragile mood to tiptoe around. I had only myself. And silence. Mr. Carter had told me to start gathering account information, reviewing anything that had my name on it or tied me legally to Richard. I knew where to begin. My old laptop was in the bottom of my bag, dusty and slow, but reliable. I opened it, waited for it to wake, and logged into our joint account with the credit union. It had been our main account for household expenses, groceries, utilities, car repairs. I handled the finances. Richard never paid much attention. In his words, "You're better at that kind of thing, Evie." Better, yes, and smarter than he realized. The account balance showed several pending charges. Most were routine, but one stood out, $2,400. Flagged, labeled as pending authorization, boat depot. A boat? I blinked, leaned forward, refreshed the screen. It hadn't gone through. The transaction had been automatically declined due to the account's internal protection limit, a setting I had added years ago, just in case. I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh rising in my throat. Amanda, of course. She must have gotten hold of one of the shared debit cards and tried to buy something ridiculous again, probably whining to Richard that she deserved it after the week she had. She always had a week. I checked the notifications tab. There it was, an automated message. Account access frozen pending verification of primary account holder. Sent to my number. And mine alone. I reached for my phone. 4 missed calls from Richard. 2 from an unknown number, Amanda's, no doubt. No voicemails. Just missed calls. That was his way. Push, then back off, then push again harder. I opened my text messages. The most recent one, from Richard, was short. "We need to talk. Something's wrong with the account." The next one came 5 minutes later. "Amanda tried to make a purchase and it got declined. What's going on?" I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I knew that saying it now would give them a chance to flip the narrative, to make me the problem. I closed the laptop. Della appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair wrapped in a scarf, eyes still sleepy. "You're up early." "Old habits," I said. You get some rest? Some. Not enough. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. You checking the damage? I nodded. Amanda tried to buy a boat. Even another. Della choked on her coffee. A what? A boat, I repeated, like the word might make more sense the second time. Didn't go through. The system flagged it and froze the account. Lord have mercy, Della muttered, shaking her head. Girl tries to drown your dignity and then wants to ride off into the sunset like she earned something. I knew she'd try something, I said. That's why I set up the limits. It's a great. And that right there, Della said, pointing her spoon at me, is why Mama called you the anchor. The mention of Mama warmed and hurt me all at once. She used to say, Evelyn doesn't talk a lot, but she sees everything. I smiled. She also said I held my feelings too long. Well, Della said, standing, maybe now's the time to let him go. That afternoon, I printed out the flagged transaction notice, along with the protection policy I had set in place when we opened the account. Mr. Carter had asked for documentation. I planned to be thorough. As I sorted the paperwork, another text came through. We need access to the account now. This isn't funny, Evie. Call me. Still no apology. No concern for where I was. No acknowledgement of Amanda's behavior. Just urgency because the money wasn't working the way it used to. At 3:45 p.m., my phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, Richard's voice was tight with controlled frustration. Evie, look, I don't know what's going on with you, but Amanda's in a bad place right now. This isn't the time to be difficult. She tried to make a purchase and got embarrassed at the store. The guy behind the counter looked at us like we were criminals. Just, can you fix this? We'll talk after. I sat in silence for a long time, staring out the window. The sky had gone cloudy, a soft gray creeping in over the rooftops. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He hadn't asked why I left. He hadn't even said my name like it mattered. Just Evie, the keeper of keys, the manager of messes. Amanda was embarrassed? Good. So was I, standing in my own kitchen with dinner sliding down my chest while my husband chose someone else's pride over my personhood. I picked up my pen and wrote across the top of the page, "We'll talk publicly." That would be my answer. No more backroom apologies. No more whispered shaming. No more pretending the pain had no witness. I was done playing quiet. I would let the truth speak in the full light of day. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of my closet with no idea what to wear. It wasn't like I was headed to a job interview or a funeral, though in a way, it felt like both. I was going to the credit union to request full access records, copies of every transaction, and clarification of joint account limitations, things Richard never once bothered to understand. I wanted to look like someone who knew her worth. I settled on a soft lavender blouse and navy slacks, clean but not flashy, something Mama would have called Sunday decent. I ran a comb through my hair, smoothed on a little moisturizer, and put on a pair of gold earrings I hadn't touched in years. Thomas had given them to me for our 15th anniversary. As I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Not the tired woman who had spent a decade walking on eggshells. Not the peacemaker. Not the ghost in her own house. But a woman who had finally remembered herself. Della handed me a brown leather folder at the door. "You got your copies?" "All here. You want me to come with?" I smiled. "I think I need to do this on my own." She nodded and stepped back, letting me pass. "Call me if anything feels off." The drive into town was short. The streets of Savannah rolled out like a familiar song, weathered storefronts, crepe myrtles blooming, neighbors waving from porches. The credit union sat on the corner of a quiet block, brick and glass, the same way it had since I was a child. I parked the Buick in the side lot, checked my folder again, and stepped inside. The cold air hit me first, artificial and brisk, a stark contrast to the sticky Georgia heat outside. A young woman at the counter looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm here to speak with someone about account records and refinancing documentation," I said, voice calm but direct. "My name is Evelyn Wright. Account ending in 1057. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She paused. Her brows lifted slightly. "Yes, Miss Wright. One moment, please." I waited on a bench by the window, folder in my lap. Outside, a lawn crew buzzed somewhere in the distance, the scent of cut grass wafting through the door each time it opened. After a few minutes, a man in a gray blazer appeared mid-40 seconds, balding slightly, wire-rimmed glasses, soft eyes that reminded me of my old high school principal. "Miss Wright?" he said, offering a hand. "I'm Ben Harris. Let's talk in my office." We walked down a short hallway into a quiet, glass-walled room. He gestured toward a chair, and I sat, placing the folder on his desk. "I'd like full transaction history for the past 3 months," I began, "including any declined charges and frozen activity. I'd also like copies of our joint refinancing documents and beneficiary records." He nodded, professional but kind. "Of course. May I ask why?" "My husband's daughter attempted to make a large purchase without my consent," I said plainly, "and now the account is frozen. I need to know exactly what protections are in place." His eyes flickered briefly, not with judgment, but recognition. "Yes, I see the note here: automatic freeze triggered by attempted withdrawal over the authorization limit. That limit is tied to your primary holder status. You're listed first on the account." "Exactly," I said, "and I want everything documented. Paper copies." "Understood." He stood, walking to the printer behind his desk. "Give me a few minutes." As I sat there, I looked around the office. Framed photos of Savannah's riverfront, a diploma from Georgia State, a small painting of a black woman walking through a cotton field, her back tall, her dress bright against a gray sky. I felt something settle in my chest again. Not anger, not pride, clarity. Ben returned with a thick folder. "This should cover everything. You can call if anything else comes up." I thanked him, shook his hand, and walked out feeling taller than I had in months. By the time I got back to Della's, the sun was high. I sat on the porch steps, folder in my lap, and just breathed. Then my phone buzzed again. Richard. This time, I let it ring once before answering. "Evie," he said quickly. "Something's wrong with the account. Amanda said it locked up. We need access. I've got bills coming through and—" "It's not locked, Richard," I said, voice steady. "It's protected." "Protected from what?" "From unauthorized use," I said. "From entitlement. From foolishness." There was a pause. "Are you serious?" "Yes," I said. "Dead serious." Amanda's voice cut in the background. "Tell her this is insane. I needed that boat." I didn't even flinch. "You let her throw food on me, Richard," I said, cutting through the noise. "You didn't stop her. You told me to apologize. That wasn't just about dinner. That was a declaration." I wasn't thinking straight. "You were thinking perfectly clear," I replied. "You just didn't expect me to respond." End quote. Another pause. "This can't be how we end things," he said, quieter now. "I didn't end anything," I replied. "You did. The moment you decided her comfort was worth more than my dignity." I hung up. Della appeared in the doorway. "That felt good, didn't it?" I nodded slowly. "Better than I thought." That evening, we sat on the porch again, no words, just lemonade, crickets, and the soft hum of a world still turning. But this time, I felt rooted. Like the storm had passed, and for once, I was still standing. I always thought dignity left you quietly like an old friend, slipping out the back door without saying goodbye. But now I knew better. Dignity doesn't leave you. You leave it. Slowly, inch by inch, every time you stay quiet when you should speak. Every time you say, "It's not worth it," just to keep the peace. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you find your way back to it. That's what Chapter 5 of my life felt like. After hanging up on Richard, I expected a storm. Angry voicemails, Amanda's voice clawing through the speaker, pleading masked as manipulation. But instead, what I got was silence. At first, I thought maybe he was giving me space. But by the next morning, when my phone finally lit up, it wasn't Richard, it was the credit union. "Mrs. Wright," the woman said, politely but firmly, "we're calling to confirm that your joint account has been flagged for suspicious activity. Our system detected an attempted withdrawal for a non-essential luxury purchase made from a secondary cardholder. Given your settings, the transaction was declined, and the account is currently pending verification." I already knew all that, but hearing it from someone else made it real in a new way. "I'm aware," I said, "and I'd like the freeze to remain in place. I'll come in tomorrow to sign the verification paperwork." "Understood." End quote. After the call, I sat on Della's porch swing, the Georgia sun already climbing high. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching a neighbor's cat crawl along the fence line like it was looking for trouble. That's when it hit me. Amanda had finally run into something she couldn't control. She couldn't guilt me, couldn't shame me, couldn't sweet-talk me into unlocking an account that didn't belong to her, and she certainly couldn't pretend she hadn't crossed the line. Not this time. Later that day, Della and I took a drive through the older part of town, where the porches were wider and the paint peeled in a way that made everything feel honest. We stopped by the small diner on Willow Street, the one we used to go to with Mama when we were kids. The same red booths, the same chalkboard menu, the same waitress, Miss Geraldine, who looked like time had refused to touch her. "Well, look what the wind blew in," she grinned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Evie Wright, in the flesh. Hi, Geraldine." She slid us into the corner booth without asking. "Still drink your tea with lemon and no sugar?" I smiled. "You remember?" "Child, I remember the way your mama used to laugh when y'all ordered pie before your entrees. That woman didn't care what order things came in, long as they came with love." That made Della smile, her eyes misting. I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. Mama had been gone 12 years, but some days it felt like yesterday. Over plates of fried green tomatoes and biscuits slathered in gravy, Della finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. "So what's next?" I wiped my mouth carefully. "I meet with Mr. Carter again on Friday. He's going to review all the documents and start the process of formally separating the accounts, legally, financially, and everything else." "And the house?" I hesitated. "Richard's name is only on the refinance. The deed is mine. And the records show I've paid nearly all the mortgage payments myself." Della let out a low whistle. "That'll be a nasty surprise for him." "I didn't set out to hurt him," I said. "I just wanted to protect myself." "That's not selfish, Evie. That's survival." When we got back to the house, the answering machine was blinking 3 messages. Della crossed her arms. "You sure you want to hear that?" I nodded. Might as well know what lies ahead. I pressed play. The first message was from Amanda. Her voice was sharp. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this isn't funny. You're ruining everything." Click. The second message came not even an hour later. This time, her tone was forced, like someone reading a script they didn't believe. "Look, I just think this got blown out of proportion. We're all family, right? Maybe you could just come back, and we'll talk." Click. The third was Richard. And it was different. His voice was quiet. Not angry, not cold, just tired. "Evie, I don't know how we got here. I miss you. I do. But Amanda's going through so much. She needs help. I know she went too far, but she's my daughter." I didn't know how to stand in the middle. Click. I stared at the machine for a long time. Della said nothing. Because what could she say? He didn't apologize. He didn't say he was wrong. He didn't ask how I was. He just explained, justified, tried to balance on a rope that didn't exist anymore. I walked outside, the sky bruising into twilight. Fireflies blinked in the garden. Somewhere down the block, a radio played old Motown, "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." I sat on the steps and closed my eyes. The world hadn't ended, but my silence had. I thought about replying. Thought about driving back, facing him, saying my piece in the same kitchen where he broke my trust. But then I remembered the look in Amanda's eyes when she poured that food on me. And I remembered my own voice, calm and clear. "I'm leaving now." I hadn't just left the house. I had left the version of me that believed I had to earn decency. That version was gone, and I wasn't going back to look for her. The next few days moved slower than I expected. Maybe that's what grief feels like when you're not mourning a death, but a decision, a home that no longer feels like one, a husband who turned into a stranger, a life you tried to build on sand. I spent the time quietly, waking early, making breakfast for Della and myself, sitting on the porch with my coffee while the cicadas hummed louder than my thoughts. I wasn't idle, Lord knows I've never known how to be, but I wasn't rushing anymore either. I was reclaiming space, breath, stillness. Friday morning, I put on a fresh blouse and met Mr. Carter at his office just like we planned. He greeted me with a warm nod and a folder already in hand. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." We sat across from each other in the small conference room, the ceiling fan clicking softly above us. He spread the documents between us: transaction records, mortgage history, the prenuptial agreement, notarized copies of our financial arrangements. "You've got a solid case," he said. "You've contributed over 90% of household finances in the last 5 years. That makes a strong argument for ownership, regardless of joint titles, especially with the prenuptial in place." I nodded. "I don't want to fight. I just want clean lines." "Then we'll give you just that," he said, tapping the papers. There was a moment of pause. Then he asked, "Do you want to pursue legal separation or divorce?" I inhaled deeply, the weight of the words settling on my chest. "Divorce. It's the courted state in Everwations Siddig." I'd never said it out loud. Not once. Not even to Della. But now that it was out there, I didn't flinch. It didn't feel like a wound. It felt like truth. Mr. Carter nodded. "We'll begin with financial separation. Once that's filed, we'll notify him formally." "Will I need to be in the room with him?" "No. Not unless he contests it. Then let's move forward." I signed the first stack of papers with steady hands. When I walked out of the office into the hot Georgia sunlight, I felt lighter, but not in the way people always describe after making a hard decision. This wasn't a floating kind of relief. It was heavier, grounded, like stepping into your own shoes after years of wearing someone else's. I stopped by the bakery on the corner and bought 2 slices of hummingbird cake, Mama's favorite, one for me, one for Della. I figured we deserved something sweet to end the week. But when I got back to Della's house, I found her on the porch, arms crossed, face unreadable. "There's someone inside," she said. My heart didn't drop. It didn't race. It steadied. "Richard?" She nodded. "Showed up 10 minutes ago. Said he just wants to talk." I stood there for a long moment, cake box in my hands, the world slowing around me. "You want me to tell him to leave?" Della asked, already reaching for the door. "No," I said. "I'll talk to him. I have discorded." She looked surprised but stepped aside. "I'm not going far. Just say the word." I walked inside and found Richard sitting on the edge of Della's couch, like a student called to the principal's office. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Evie," he started, standing quickly. "I didn't come to fight. I swear. I didn't know what else to do." I set the cake on the table and looked at him, not speaking. He cleared his throat. "Amanda's gone. She packed up and left yesterday. Said she didn't need either of us." I raised an eyebrow. "So you came to find the one person you thought might still clean up the mess?" His face flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said, calm. "What's not fair is what happened in that kitchen." I panicked, Evie. She's my daughter. She was already spiraling, and "You picked a side," I interrupted. "And I accepted that." He took a step closer. "I miss you." I looked him in the eyes. "Do you miss me? Or do you miss the way I made your life easier?" He didn't answer. But his silence was loud. "I filed," I said. His brows furrowed. "What?" "For divorce. Today." I signed the paperwork. He looked stunned, like the reality hadn't settled in until just now. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I already did," I replied, "because loving someone should never come at the cost of yourself." He sat down again, slowly. "I just thought we'd grow old together. It's Saventuid Riven. I'm Story." I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was heartbreaking, because once upon a time, I thought that too. But you can't grow old together with someone who won't stand beside you when it counts. You just grow small, trying to hold everything up alone. I reached into the cake box, slid one slice across the table toward him. "You're still welcome to eat, but this is just cake, Richard, not a second chance." He didn't touch it. When I turned to leave, he called after me. "Evie?" "Yes?" He swallowed hard. "I don't think I ever really saw you. Not the whole you. Not until now." I nodded. "That's a shame. I've been right here the whole time." I walked out, the screen door shutting softly behind me, and found Della waiting with her arms crossed. "Well, he's still blind," I said. She smiled. "But you're not." We sat together and ate our slices in silence, the porch warm beneath us, the sun setting low. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to look over my shoulder. I was exactly where I was meant to be. The following Monday, I returned to the credit union to finalize the verification documents. Mr. Harris greeted me with a firm handshake and an envelope thick with paperwork. "Everything's in order," he said. You're now the sole access holder. We've removed secondary card holders and updated contact information. No further transactions can be made without your approval." "Good," I replied, steady as stone. "Thank you." I signed where he pointed, and by the time I walked out, I had more than legal control. I had peace of mind. Control wasn't about power. It was about protection. And after years of sacrificing my place at the table, I had finally built my own. Back at Della's, the news was waiting for me in the form of a message on her landline machine. I hadn't checked it in days, figuring most of it would be junk calls or Richard's third round of half apologies. But the voice that greeted me was neither. "This is Officer Calhoun with the Savannah Police Department. Mrs. Wright, we received a report regarding unusual activity at your residence. Please return our call at your earliest convenience." My stomach tightened. I called the number immediately. The officer was polite but direct. "We received a report from one Amanda Weston claiming she was locked out of the residence she shares with you. Given the address and her claims of partial residency, we're obligated to investigate." "She doesn't live there," I said, voice calm. "She was staying temporarily. There's no lease, no mail in her name. She's never contributed a dime, and she was asked to leave after an incident." "I understand. But for now, I recommend you visit the property. With documentation. Just to be safe." "It's cited is 1. I thanked him, hung up, and stood in the middle of the kitchen for a long moment. "She tried to get the police involved?" Della asked, her hands on her hips. "She's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things," Della muttered. "You going back alone?" "No," I said. "You're coming with me." We arrived at the house just after lunch. It looked the same: white shutters, hydrangeas blooming along the walkway, but something about it felt off, like the air around it had been disturbed. I unlocked the front door with my key, Della close behind. The inside was a mess. Drawers open, cushions tossed, picture frames on the floor. "She was looking for something," Della said. "Probably banking info," I replied, kneeling to pick up a photo of Thomas and me. It had been tossed like trash. I gathered my breath and walked room to room, documenting everything with my phone, every overturned lamp, every ransacked drawer. Then I opened the hallway closet and found something that stopped me cold. My mother's quilt, the one I kept in a sealed box, embroidered with her initials. Amanda had torn it open, fabric pulled, edges ripped, like she had been searching for something hidden inside. Della gasped behind me. "That girl has no shame." "No," I said quietly, fingers trembling as I folded the quilt. "But she's got fear, and she's running out of places to aim it." I called Officer Calhoun right then and there. He arrived 30 minutes later, a tall man with a kind face and a notebook in hand. "You were right to document everything," he said, glancing around the room. "Given that she had no legal right to the property, and this looks more like a search than a residence, well, she's going to have a hard time explaining it." "Do I need a restraining order?" I asked. He paused. "If she comes back uninvited, I'd recommend it. For now, I'll file the report and advise her to cease contact." "It's not sufficient." After he left, Della helped me put the house back in order. We didn't talk much. Sometimes silence carries more weight than words ever could. By early evening, I stood in the middle of the kitchen, hands on the back of a chair, and felt something shift inside me. This was still my home. No amount of chaos could take that from me. Later that night, back at Della's, we sat on the porch again. I told her everything: the torn quilt, the broken frames, the look in Amanda's eyes that I couldn't quite forget. "She's spiraling," I said, "and trying to drag you with her." "I'm not going," I said, firmer now. "I've lived in other people's emotions too long. This is where it stops." Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think this is over? You're going to regret this." He always loved me more. I didn't respond. I saved it. Della leaned over and read it. "She's starting to sound unwell." "She's always been unwell," I said. "But now she's dangerous." We sat in silence, crickets chirping in the yard and the wind playing through the magnolia trees. "I'll call Mr. Carter in the morning," I said. "Time to move on the house formally." Della nodded. "And if she shows up again?" I looked her square in the eye. "She won't get through the door." Because this time, I wasn't just protecting my peace. I was defending it. The next morning, I woke before sunrise with the weight of Amanda's message still pressing at the edge of my thoughts. He always loved me more. Those words weren't just petty, they were calculated. A final twist of the knife meant to make me question everything, even now. But I didn't flinch. I had too much work to do to waste time on ghosts. After breakfast, I drove alone to Mr. Carter's office with my shoulder blades tense and my folder tucked tight under my arm. Della offered to come, but I told her I needed to face this step by myself. The filing to reclaim sole ownership of the house was more than a legal matter, it was a symbolic one. I wasn't just evicting Amanda from my property. I was evicting her presence from my mind, my routines, my peace. Mr. Carter met me with a slight smile and fresh copies of the deed. I filed the police report into our affidavit, he said. Given the lack of residency, the prenuptial agreement, and your payment history, this process should move quickly. If Richard contests it, we'll respond accordingly. He won't, I said confidently. He's tired, and too proud to look like the man who let his daughter ransack his wife's home. We went through the documents line by line, and I initialed each section with a steady hand. The final signature felt like closing a door. Click, latch, silence. You should have formal confirmation within 10 business days, Mr. Carter said, standing. Congratulations, Mrs. Wright. Just Evelyn now, I replied with a quiet smile. When I walked out into the sun, I didn't head straight back to Della's. Instead, I took a detour. I drove through my old neighborhood, the one where Thomas and I had bought our first house. The one where I used to hang laundry on a line, where kids played until the streetlights came on, where people waved with both hands and passed casseroles across fences. I hadn't been back in years. I pulled up beside the old house. A new family lived there now. A little boy ran across the yard with a toy airplane in hand. His mother stood on the porch, laughing as he flew past. That used to be me. That used to be us. I didn't linger, just nodded to the memory and kept driving. When I got back to Della's, she was on the porch, snapping green beans into a colander like Mama used to. Well? She asked, without looking up. It's done, I said. She smiled. About time. That afternoon, we cooked together. Chicken and dumplings, fried okra, sweet iced tea with mint. I hadn't cooked like that in a long time, not for someone else, not for Joy. The kitchen filled with warmth and the kind of noise that heals the clatter of pots, the hiss of oil, the occasional burst of shared laughter. That night, we ate out on the porch with our feet up and our plates balanced on our laps. Do you think she'll come back? Della asked gently. I didn't answer right away. She might, I said finally. But if she does, it won't be to take anything. It'll be to see what she lost. And Richard. I think he's already gone, I said, even if he doesn't know it yet. As the stars came out one by one, I leaned back in my chair and looked up at the night sky. It had been weeks since I left. Weeks since I'd heard that shout in my kitchen, felt the noodles hit my chest, smelled the betrayal thick in the air. And yet, every day since, I'd felt stronger. Not in a loud, triumphant way, but in the quiet way that builds from doing the right thing, one steady step at a time. Later, in bed, I lay awake for a long time staring at the ceiling. A question formed in my mind. What now? Not in a fearful way. Not with panic, but with real curiosity. I had survived the storm. Now it was time to plant something new in the soil it left behind. In the morning, I'd go back to my house not to live, not yet, but to clean. To bless it again with presence and patience, to prepare it for whatever came next. And maybe, just maybe, to make it mine in ways it never was before. The house greeted me like an old friend you haven't seen in years, familiar, worn, and holding on to a little more silence than you remember. I stepped through the front door just after 9 in the morning, keys jangling in my hand, the sun pouring in through the east-facing windows. The scent of aged wood and dust lingered, mixed with something faintly floral, probably the potpourri I'd set out last spring and forgotten to replace. I stood in the center of the living room and took a long, slow breath. It was mine now, fully, legally, and without question. And yet, it didn't quite feel like home yet. Not with Amanda's mess still echoing in the scuffs on the floor, the broken drawer handles, the tilted picture frames. It felt like a battlefield in the aftermath. I rolled up my sleeves. I started in the kitchen. The table where it all happened, the insults, the shouting. The moment Richard drew his line was scratched and stained. I ran my hand across it, not in anger, but in acknowledgement. This table had been a witness. I would keep it, sand it down. Refinish it. It deserved a second life, just like I did. I scrubbed the counters until my elbows ached, then opened the windows wide to let in the wind. I stripped the guest room, Amanda's temporary space, and packed her belongings into a single cardboard box. Lipsticks, tangled jewelry, a silk robe she never washed. Nothing of value. Nothing she'd bother to return for. I found one of my scarves stuffed behind the dresser, crumpled, stained with a smear of lipstick, like she had worn it just to spite me. I held it up, turned it in the light, then dropped it into the trash. Some things don't need saving. By late afternoon, the house was breathing again. The air moved. The walls felt lighter. It didn't erase what happened, but it softened it. I sat in the den, my knees sore, my hands dry and aching, and for a moment I let myself feel proud. That's when the knock came. It was soft, polite, nothing like the shouting from weeks before. I opened the door slowly. Richard stood there, holding a manila envelope in one hand, eyes downcast. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. "I just came to drop this off." "What is it?" "My response," he said, "to the divorce." I took the envelope, kept it sealed. "You could have mailed it." "I know," he said, "but I needed to see this place again, to see what I lost." We stood in silence. "I never meant for it to end like this," he added. "It didn't end like this," I replied. "It ended the moment you chose not to defend me." His eyes flicked up. "I was afraid. Amanda's all I have." "No," I said. "She's all you're willing to have. There's a difference." He shifted. "I miss you." "You miss the version of me that didn't demand better." Richard's eyes glistened. But I didn't flinch. I'd cried enough for both of us already. He turned to go, then paused. "You look strong." "I am," I said. When I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it not because I was weak, but because I needed to savor the quiet that followed. That night, I cooked myself dinner in my own kitchen for the first time in weeks. Something simple: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with garlic and butter. I played Sam Cooke on the record player Thomas gave me our last Christmas together. His voice filled the space like a benediction. As I ate, I looked around the room and made a list in my head. New curtains, paint the walls, replace the clock Amanda always said was too loud, and maybe, just maybe, a garden. Something of my own, blooming from the roots I was planting now. After dinner, I curled up on the couch, my hands warm from washing dishes, my body tired but satisfied. I opened the manila envelope Richard had left. Inside was a signed agreement, uncontested divorce, acknowledgement of separate assets, and no claims on the house. No fight, no bargaining, just closure. I placed the papers on the coffee table and exhaled. It was done. But my story wasn't. The morning after Richard's visit, I didn't wake with dread in my chest. For the first time in what felt like years, I opened my eyes and didn't feel like I had to brace myself for something. No side eyes from Amanda. No cold shoulders from the man who used to love me. Just sunlight, birdsong, and the creak of the ceiling fan above my bed. I brewed coffee in silence, savoring the way the house breathed around me. It was quieter now, not empty, but peaceful. Like it had finally exhaled, too. I sat at the kitchen table with my mug in both hands, looking out the window at the small patch of yard I'd ignored for too long. The grass was uneven, the flower beds bare, and the soil cracked like it had given up waiting for someone to tend to it. "I'll fix you next," I whispered. Later that day, I stopped by the hardware store on Main. The man behind the counter, Mr. Jenkins, a white-haired old friend of Thomas's, gave me a nod as I entered. "Well, look what the Lord dragged in," he chuckled. "You got that look in your eye, Evelyn, that bout to dig up the past and plant something better look." I smiled. "You read me right." An hour later, I drove home with gardening gloves, a few packs of seeds, zinnias, marigolds, collards, and cherry tomatoes, and a trowel that felt right in my hand. By late afternoon, I was on my knees in the dirt, digging and turning, my back sweaty and my heart calm. I wasn't just reclaiming the yard. I was reclaiming space, reclaiming beauty, reclaiming the part of myself that found joy in slow, quiet creation. That's when my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, peeked over the fence. She was in her 70s, always wore pearls with her bathrobe, and had a dog named Bert who barked like a sinner come Sunday. "Well, I'll be," she said, smiling. Didn't think I'd see you back here so soon. Figured it was time, I said, wiping my forehead with the back of my wrist. She leaned in closer. Saw your husband drive off the other day. He looked like someone who finally got the message. He did, I said simply. She nodded. Good. You deserve better, Evelyn. Always did. Thank you. You let me know if you want help with them zinnias. Mine always bloom like they've got somewhere to be. I laughed. Will do. As she walked away, I sat back on my heels and looked at the mess I'd made, soil everywhere, weeds piled like sins ready to be burned. But I didn't mind. It was my mess. And this time, it was leading to something beautiful. The next few days passed in rhythm. Wake, coffee, garden, read, breathe. I didn't rush to fill the space Richard and Amanda left behind. I let it be. I let it echo. I let it teach me. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea in my journal, a voice called out from the sidewalk. Mrs. Wright? It was a young woman, early 30s. Soft voice, nervous smile. She held a clipboard in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. I hope I'm not intruding, she said. I live down on Turner Street. I'm part of the neighborhood volunteer group. We're doing check-ins on residents after the last storm. Just making sure folks are okay. I blinked, surprised. That's kind of you. I brought a few things, she said, holding out the bag. Fresh bread, some fruit, and a small pie. I hesitated, touched in a way I hadn't expected. Thank you. What's your name? Leah. Come sit a moment, Leah, I said, gesturing to the rocking chair beside me. She did. We talked. She was new to town, divorced, starting over. Her voice trembled a little when she mentioned the man she left behind. I stayed too long, she admitted. Told myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. I nodded, the ache in her words familiar. I know that story, I said gently. She looked at me. How did you get out? I remembered who I was, I said. And then I stopped apologizing for it. We sat in silence for a bit, sipping tea and watching the sun dip low. Before she left, she turned and said, You don't know this, but hearing you say that, it helps. That night, I journaled late into the evening. Words poured out of me, memories, truths, confessions I hadn't dared speak aloud even to Della. I wrote about Amanda, about the guilt I carried for letting her cruelty bruise me so deeply. I wrote about Richard, and how love without loyalty is just a performance. And I wrote about myself not as a victim, but as a woman who woke up. As I closed the journal, I looked around the room and whispered, I'm still here. And that, more than anything, felt like victory. The first flower bloomed 2 weeks later, a single zinnia, deep red and defiant, poking its head through the soil like it had been waiting all year to tell the world, I made it. I crouched beside it in the early morning light, dew still clinging to its petals, and smiled like I'd just been handed an answered prayer. I hadn't expected it so soon. The garden had become my sanctuary. Each morning I woke with a quiet excitement. Water, pull, dig, breathe. I could measure my healing in the way the soil softened, the way the bees returned, the way my hands no longer shook when I opened the front door. Life was growing again, not just in the earth, but in me. Della came by that morning with 2 jars of fig preserves and a grin. Well, look at you, Farmer Evelyn, she teased, eyeing the flower beds. I half expect to see you in overalls next time. I laughed. Don't tempt me. I've got a pair from Thomas stashed in the attic. We sat on the porch, buttered toast with her preserves, and sipped black coffee as the sun climbed higher. She looked at me differently now, not with concern, not with pity, but with a kind of sisterly pride that warmed me to my core. You're glowing, she said softly. I'm digging, I replied. No, baby, you're healing. Later that afternoon, I opened the envelope from the county clerk's office. Inside was the official confirmation. My divorce had been processed, finalized, sealed. I stared at the document for a long time, reading each line as if it might vanish if I blinked. It didn't. My name stood alone, strong, centered. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I simply folded the paper and placed it into a new file marked New Beginnings. That evening, I stood in front of my closet, running my fingers along clothes I hadn't worn in years, dresses from another decade, shoes still boxed, a blazer I once wore to my retirement party. I pulled out a soft linen dress in olive green, slipped it on, and looked at myself in the mirror. There she was, The woman who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen. The woman who loved red wine and jazz records and late-night phone calls. The woman who had gone quiet but never gone missing. I was her again. Just then, the doorbell rang. It startled me not because someone was there, but because, for once, I wasn't expecting trouble. I peeked through the curtain and saw Leah, the young woman from Turner Street. I opened the door with a smile. "Evening, sweetheart." "Eden." She held out a small potted plant, a yellow daisy. "I brought you something. You've been on my mind." I took it gently. "That's very thoughtful." "I've been coming to the garden club at the church," she said. "Figured you'd be the perfect person to show me what to do with this." "Well," I chuckled. "First you talk to it, then you promise it the sun, then you water it like it deserves to bloom." She laughed, but her eyes shimmered. We sat on the porch again. She told me about her progress. She'd found a job at the bookstore, rented a small apartment above the cafe, started sleeping through the night without needing a white noise machine. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to believe that leaving was failure. But now, it feels like the bravest thing I've ever done." "It is," I said. "Leaving doesn't mean you gave up. It means you stopped giving yourself away." She nodded slowly, her jaw tight. "My mama stayed too long. I used to think that made her strong. Now I see it just made her tired." I touched her hand gently. "Strength and surrender often wear the same face, but only one of them will let you sleep at night." She stayed for dinner, grilled vegetables from the garden, cornbread, sweet tea so strong it could stand up by itself. We talked, laughed, cried. She asked about Thomas, about Richard, about Amanda. "Do you think she'll ever apologize?" Leah asked gently. I didn't answer right away. "No," I said. "But I think one day she'll understand. And that's enough." After she left, I walked through the garden in the twilight. The zinnias had opened wider. The tomatoes were beginning to show fruit. Even the old fig tree in the back had started to sprout fresh leaves. I stood barefoot in the soil, the earth cool beneath me, and closed my eyes. I was alone, and I was whole. The two were not contradictions. The first storm of the season rolled in a few days later, one of those Savannah summer storms that comes out of nowhere, dragging its feet across the sky like it's got something to prove. I was in the garden when the clouds broke open. The first drops were gentle, but within minutes the rain came down in thick sheets, soaking me through. I should have run for cover, but instead I tilted my head back, closed my eyes, and let it wash over me. Let it baptize me. Let it take whatever was left of the old life clinging to my skin and rinse it away. Della called later that afternoon, worried I'd be caught out in it. "I'm fine," I told her, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping. "Felt good, actually." She laughed. "You always were a little wild when no one was looking. Maybe I stopped caring who's looking." "Well, good, 'cause folks are talking." I sat up straighter. "About what?" "About you. About the garden. About how you've come back to life." That's what Mrs. Callahan said. Said it like it was a miracle. I chuckled. Lord, the things people say when they finally see you for the first time. But she wasn't wrong. Since I'd reclaimed the house, it felt like I was reclaiming more than bricks and beams. I was reclaiming my name in the mouths of people who'd once seen me only as Richard's quiet wife. Now, I was Evelyn again. Just Evelyn, whole and untethered. The garden was thriving, so was I. Every morning I picked collards and basil and cherry tomatoes, so sweet they tasted like sunlight. I took extras down to the church pantry. I baked cornbread for my neighbors. I hosted a Sunday tea for the women on the block, something small, just iced drinks and pound cake on the porch, but it felt like home again. Leah came too, sitting close, eyes brighter than they were the day we met. "You've built something beautiful here," she said softly. I looked at the zinnias blooming like they had secrets to tell. I didn't build it alone, and I hadn't. Grief was a strange gardener. It pulled out the weeds, yes, but it also tilled the soil, made room for new roots. That evening, as I washed dishes at the sink, the phone rang. I almost let it go, but something told me to answer. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was slow, strained, familiar. "Evie, it's Richard." I didn't speak right away. "I won't keep you," he said. "I just wanted to say something I should have said a long time ago." I waited. "I'm sorry." The words hung there, awkward and unsure, like they didn't know where to land. "For what?" I asked, keeping my voice even. For not standing up for you. For letting Amanda treat you the way she did. For thinking love meant avoiding conflict instead of protecting it. I closed my eyes. It took me losing everything, he continued, to realize I never really appreciated what I had. You held everything together. I didn't know how to be in a family where I wasn't the center of it. That made something in me ache. Not for him, but for the version of me who waited years to hear this. I'm glad you finally understand, I said. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I said gently, because I'm not offering it. Not today. He was quiet. But I do wish you well, I added. And I hope Amanda finds the kind of help that doesn't cost someone else their peace. Are for it. She's in therapy, he said. Finally. That's a start. I won't call again. Goodbye, Richard. And just like that, it was over. Not with yelling, not with slammed doors, just a phone call, a few words, and peace. Later that night, I sat in the garden under a sky cleared of clouds. The moonlight bathed the leaves in silver, and the air smelled like mint and rain. I thought about forgiveness, about how it wasn't a gift you gave someone else, it was the key to your own front door. I had locked mine for a long time, but now it was open, and only welcome things were allowed inside. Autumn arrived slowly in Savannah, tiptoeing in with cooler breezes and golden sunlight that lingered a little longer each morning. The garden shifted with the season, less color, more texture. The zinnias wilted, but the collards thrived. My fig tree held on to its final fruit like a secret it wasn't ready to share. I liked it better this way. Quieter, more honest. By now, the house felt different. Not just because Richard was gone, or Amanda's scent had long faded from the guest room, but because every room had been touched by my hands again, repainted, repaired, reclaimed. Even the bedroom. I'd taken down the photos of our wedding not with spite, but with grace. I'd replaced them with framed pictures of my garden, of Mama and Della, and even a faded photo of Thomas holding my hand on Tybee Island, both of us laughing like we had no idea what time was. I hadn't felt this kind of solitude in years, not lonely, just untethered. I used to be afraid of it. Now I wore it like a shawl across my shoulders. The neighborhood had noticed too. One Sunday after church, Mrs. Callahan pulled me aside as we filed out of the sanctuary. Evelyn, I just wanted to say, you've become something of a lighthouse around here. A lighthouse? I blinked. She smiled, soft and knowing. You're the reminder that storms pass, that we don't have to go down with the ship. I laughed gently. I'm just planting flowers. Maybe, she said. But flowers are proof something beautiful survived. That evening, I sat on the porch with Leah, who was cradling a thick binder in her lap. She'd begun applying for scholarships, talking about going back to school. Social work, maybe. Something that helped people rebuild. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she said. You don't have to be strong all at once, I replied. Just honest. That's where real strength starts. She nodded, eyes wide. You make it look easy. It wasn't, I said. It still isn't. But I stopped looking for someone else to give me permission to be whole. End quote. Later, after Leah left, I found myself in the back of the house, standing in front of the closet that still held one box I hadn't touched Amanda's. I'd kept it not out of sentiment, but out of fatigue. It had been easier to ignore it, but not anymore. I brought the box to the kitchen table, opened the flaps, and carefully sorted through what remained. A worn journal, a tangled bracelet, a college sweatshirt, a photograph of Richard and Amanda when she was still a child before resentment shaped her spine, before jealousy made her cruel. She looked like a girl I might have loved. I pulled out the journal and flipped through a few pages. Some were empty, others scribbled with half-thoughts, bitterness, longing. One page caught my eye. I hate how perfect she is. I hate how he looks at her like she fixed what I broke. I closed the book softly. She had never hated me. Not really. She hated what she thought I represented, proof that her father's love could move on, even when she hadn't. That didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained it. I placed the journal back in the box, sealed it shut, and scribbled on the lid, "Return to sender." The next morning, I dropped it at the post office. No note, no warning, just a quiet return of what was never mine to carry. Back home, I brewed tea and walked barefoot through the garden, cool soil clinging to my toes. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fig and pine. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime danced. And inside me, a door that had been stuck for years creaked open just a little wider. Thanksgiving came quicker than I expected. The neighborhood buzzed with plans, potlucks, church drives, backyard smokers hissing with brisket and turkey legs. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't preparing a feast for someone who wouldn't say thank you. I wasn't hosting out of obligation or pretending to smile through tension so thick it soured the gravy. This year, the table would be mine, the guest list mine, and every dish placed on it would be made with a quiet kind of joy. Della and I spent the week before planning our own gathering, just a handful of close friends, a few neighbors, and Leah, who decided to stay in town instead of visiting her mother upstate. "Too many memories in that house," she'd said. "Too many ghosts I'm not ready to sit with." I understood that. We held the dinner on my porch, tables pushed together, covered with mismatched cloths and candles in mason jars. The garden behind us shimmered under string lights, the collards still holding strong in the cool air, stubborn and proud just like us. As we passed bowls and laughed over sweet potato pie that fell apart too soon, I looked around the table and realized something. I hadn't lost a family. I'd built one. A different kind. One born of survival, softness, and truth. Women who had been bruised and buried and still chose to bloom. "Tell us something you're thankful for," Leah said, suddenly grinning. "But it has to be something you never thought you'd be grateful for." The group chuckled, glancing around. Della went first. "My gray hair," she said, "'cause it means I lived long enough to earn it." Mrs. Callahan chimed in, raising her wine glass. "That my ex-husband ran off with a yoga instructor. Saved me from a hip replacement trying to keep up with him." Laughter bubbled around the table. Then they all looked at me. I paused, my fork hovering over a bit of cranberry sauce. "My divorce," I said simply. The table went quiet, but not cold, just still like they were waiting. "I never thought I'd thank God for a man walking out of my life," I said, voice steady. "But if he hadn't, I wouldn't have walked back into my own." When stated. Della reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. Later, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were stacked high in the sink, I sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a knit shawl, the last flickers of candlelight warming the dusk. That's when I saw it. A single note stuck to my front door, flapping gently in the breeze. I stood and peeled it from the wood, unfolding it slowly. It was from Amanda. "Thank you for sending the box. I didn't deserve it. I know that now." There was no return address, no signature, just a confession. Or maybe a beginning. I stood there for a long moment, the note in my hand, the moonlight soft on my skin. I didn't feel rage or relief, just a quiet kind of release. I didn't know if I'd ever hear from her again, and I didn't need to. That apology wasn't for reconciliation, it was acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's all we really need. December brought a hush to the world. Not silence, not absence, just a softness that wrapped itself around the neighborhood like a wool blanket. The trees thinned, the air crisped, and the garden slowed its breathing. Even the birds seemed gentler, their songs stretching into the cold. I'd always loved this time of year, even when the holidays hurt. When Thomas died, Christmas was unbearable, his stocking untouched, his mug still hanging from the rack. When I married Richard, I tried to revive the joy, to build something new. But every garland, every string of lights, felt like decoration over a crack in the wall. This year was different. No pretending, no performance. Just me, my home, and a season of my own making. I decorated simply pine branches on the mantel, cinnamon sticks in the stovepat, white candles in every window. I baked small loaves of gingerbread and left them on neighbors' porches with handwritten notes. Della and I stitched ornaments from scrap fabric at her kitchen table, laughing about how crooked our stitches had become over the years. And on the quietest nights, I sat alone beside the tree, a mug of cider in hand, and let the peace sink into my bones. I hadn't expected a package, but there it was on my porch one morning. No return address, just a plain brown box wrapped with twine. Inside, I found something that nearly stopped my breath. My mother's brooch. The one Amanda had taken the night of our final argument. The one I'd assumed had been lost in her rage. It sat atop a folded piece of paper, carefully wrapped in tissue. "I'm sorry," Truly, I don't know who I am yet, but I know I was wrong. I read the note 3 times. Not because I doubted its sincerity, but because the words felt like another layer of dust being lifted from the corners of my spirit. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just breathed deeper. That evening, I pinned the brooch to the collar of my coat. I wore it to the church candlelight service, where Della and I sat in the back pew, humming familiar hymns and holding paper candles. When we stepped out afterward, the air was cold and clear, the stars sharp against the ink of the sky. "You thinking about her?" Della asked. I nodded. "She's trying, in her own way." "You gonna let her back in?" I shook my head. "Not into my life, but maybe into my prayers." Note as my port of besting, we walked slowly toward the car, arms looped, the crunch of gravel beneath our feet steady and sure. "You know," Della said, "Mama would be proud of you." "I hope so." "No, Evie, she'd be proud. Not for surviving, but for turning survival into something worth sharing." That night, I lit a candle in the kitchen window. Not for Amanda, not for Richard, but for myself, for the version of me who never thought she'd make it to this kind of peace, for the version of me who finally did. The new year arrived not with fireworks or champagne, but with the soft ticking of my living room clock and the hum of the heater keeping the cold at bay. I didn't stay up to watch the ball drop. I didn't feel the need to mark the hour like I used to. Time had already shifted for me weeks ago on the day I walked out of that kitchen covered in food and silence. That was the moment everything changed. January mornings in Savannah are a strange kind of beautiful. The ground is still, the sky pale, and everything carries a hush like it's waiting for something holy. I woke early on the first day of the year and stepped outside barefoot, letting the cold porch boards bite at my soles. I whispered into the mist, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, just to the morning, the air, the chance to begin again. That week, I took inventory, not of things, but of truths. I wrote in my journal every morning, 5 things I'd let go, 5 things I wanted to hold. Let go: resentment, shame, silence, guilt, and the belief that being needed is the same as being loved. Hold: my name, my roots, my softness, my voice, and my right to joy. Leah visited often. She'd started classes online, balancing work at the bookstore with studying for her social work certification. Her face had changed, less guarded, more lit from the inside. "You helped me get here," she said one evening, curled up on my couch, a mug of peppermint tea in her lap. "No," I said, smiling. "You just needed someone to remind you that you could." She paused. "Do you ever wish you'd left sooner?" That question sat heavy between us. "Yes," I said after a moment, "but I also know I left at the exact moment I was ready. I hope I'm that brave." "You already are." Later that week, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Neat. It was from Amanda. "Dear Evelyn, thank you for not slamming the door in my face, even when you had every right to. I've started counseling. I'm learning that grief and jealousy can rot a person from the inside. I blamed you for everything that changed after my mother died, but the truth is, nothing would have brought her back. You didn't replace her. You just loved him the way he needed to be loved. I couldn't see that. I won't ask for anything. I just wanted to tell you I'm trying. Amanda." I folded the letter and set it beside the brooch, now kept in a small box by my bed. I didn't write back, but I lit another candle in the window that night. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't about restoring the relationship, it's about restoring yourself. That same weekend, I received a call from Pastor Hill. "We're starting a women's circle," he said. "Women over 50, nothing formal, just stories, tea, and space to talk." "I don't know if I'm much for sharing," I said. He chuckled. "Evie, you've lived through fire and came out blooming. You've got a testimony that's waiting to be heard." So I agreed. The first meeting was small, just 7 of us, seated in a circle in the church's fellowship hall. There were stories of lost husbands, broken children, hidden heartbreaks. I listened. I nodded. And when it was my turn, I didn't hesitate. "I thought keeping quiet meant keeping peace," I said. But all it did was keep me small. The room went still. Not from judgment, but from recognition. They understood. And by the end of the evening, we were laughing, crying, holding hands over styrofoam cups of lukewarm tea like we'd been waiting years to be seen. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, I saw the candles still flickering in my window. A light for the woman I used to be. A light for the ones still finding their way out. February came with a quiet grace. The air stayed cool, but the earth beneath my garden had started to stir again. Tiny green shoots poked through the dirt like whispers of something beautiful on its way. I found myself waking earlier, stepping barefoot into the dew, checking each plant like an old friend returning from a long journey. Life, I was learning, comes back slowly. So does trust. One Thursday morning, after the women's circle, Pastor Hill pulled me aside. "You ever think about sharing your story outside these walls?" he asked, brushing dust from his sleeve. "We've got a radio program now, local station, testimonies mostly, reflections from folks who've seen a little life." I blinked. "You want me to speak?" "Just be yourself," he smiled. "That's all the message anyone needs." I hesitated. "I'm not a preacher." "Didn't say you were. But you've been through fire and came out a garden. That speaks louder than any sermon." So I said yes. The station was small, just a corner room above the hardware store, with foam-padded walls and a little red light that blinked when the mic was hot. The host, a soft-spoken woman named Brenda, asked me to just talk like I would at my kitchen table. So I did. I talked about Thomas, about grief, about marrying Richard and mistaking endurance for love. I told the story of Amanda, of the plate, of the words that shattered everything. "Apologize to my daughter or this marriage is over." End quote. It's a bitterly 7-dated is a potaply dooning ond. And I talked about walking away. Sometimes, I said into the mic, we think leaving means failure. But sometimes, it means freedom. Sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk out the door and not look back. Brenda nodded silently across the table, her eyes glistening. After the show aired, I didn't expect much. But within days, the letters started to come in. Women from all over the county, some older than me, some younger. All of them carrying stories like mine in pieces, stories they hadn't told aloud, stories buried under years of just get through it and he didn't mean it, and I stayed for the children. They called me brave. I didn't feel brave, but I felt seen, and that mattered more. One afternoon, I found a letter tucked into my mailbox with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, careful, intentional. "Evie?" I heard the broadcast. I cried the whole way through, not out of shame, but because for the first time, I understood the woman I hurt. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend my life becoming someone who might. Thank you for walking away. It taught me what no one else ever could. Amanda." I read the letter on the porch, the sun warm on my shoulders, the wind lifting my hair gently. I didn't cry. But I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Not to Amanda, not to anyone in particular, just to the universe, the soil, the road that had brought me here. That evening, Leah came by with a stack of class notes and a question in her eyes. "I want to tell my story too," she said, "but I don't know where to start." "Start where it hurt," I said, "then follow the healing." She nodded, quietly writing the words in the margin of her notebook. And just like that, another voice was finding its way to the light. Later that night, as I watered the plants on the windowsill, I looked out across my yard and realized something. This wasn't just a home anymore. It was a haven. For me. For Leah. For every woman who'd ever had to walk away with nothing but her name and the echo of her own voice. Spring arrived not with fanfare, but with certainty. The trees stretched a little taller. The wind warmed. The garden burst into color like it had been holding its breath all winter. Daffodils swayed at the edge of the walkway, and bees hummed around the blossoming fig tree like they'd been invited. Inside the house, sunlight touched every corner. There was no trace of Amanda anymore, no echoes of Richard's voice, no rooms arranged for someone else's comfort, only mine. Every photo, every pillow, every chair turned just so it was all mine now. And yet, the house didn't feel full of me. It felt full of us. All the women who came to the circle, all the listeners who sent their quiet thanks, all the hearts who heard a broken story and found themselves in the pieces. The radio show had grown beyond anything I imagined. What started as one episode turned into a weekly segment, Letters to the Quiet Ones. Brenda named it. Women from across the state wrote in, called in, even stopped me on the sidewalk. "You said what I couldn't. You made me brave. I left because of you." I never asked for any of that. But it came. Like spring. like healing. One evening, Leah and I sat on the porch, the garden blooming behind us, the air thick with magnolia. She held a small notebook in her lap. "I wrote something," she said softly. "Would you tell me if it's good?" She read aloud her story, in her own voice. Not polished, not perfect, but raw and honest and real. I listened without interrupting, the way someone once listened to me. When she finished, I said, "It's not just good, it's true, and that's better." End quote. She smiled, tears pooling. "I think I want to do what you're doing, help other women tell their stories." "You already are," I said. The porch light flickered on as dusk settled in, and the cicadas began their song. "You know," Leah said, "I never thought pain could be useful. But watching you, I think maybe it can be. Not for revenge, not even for closure, just for connection." I nodded. "Pain can break us, or it can open us. The choice is always ours." That is Autobahn crossed. That night, after Leah left, I sat alone with my tea and looked out at the garden, alive with color. So much had changed. Amanda hadn't written again. She didn't need to. I'd let go of the weight, and forgiveness had rooted itself in me like another flower, one that didn't need tending, just space. Richard hadn't called either. But last I'd heard, he'd moved to Charleston. Quietly, alone. And that, I thought, was enough. I looked around the porch, the kitchen glowing through the window, and felt it in my bones. I was whole. Not because I'd been put back together, but because I'd rebuilt myself on my own terms. There was no grand finale, no parade, no final reckoning. Just peace. Just a woman in her garden, drinking tea, listening to the wind, and knowing deep in her chest that she had not only survived, but grown. And every woman who walked through that gate from here on out would know. This was a place where dignity lived, where stories mattered, where silence had finally been replaced by strength. I stood, stretched, and whispered into the night. I am still here. And for the first time, the echo didn't come from the past. It came from within.